do we know about the crime scene evidence that raises a reasonable doubt? Well, we know from Anna Wilson that she received some nail clippings belonging to Mr. Monroe, and for those nail clippings to be examined. Well, she did examine the nail clippings from Mr. Monroe, and what she labeled as the DNA profile for the DNA that came from underneath Mr. Monroe's nails is that it was an unknown male DNA source. She couldn't contribute that DNA profile to anybody. Mr. Nichols is excluded as the donor to the unknown male DNA found under Mr. Monroe's nails. What else do we know? We can't exclude Mr. Monroe. And why can't we exclude Mr. Monroe? We can't exclude him because his DNA sample was never examined. His DNA sample wasn't examined and compared to the DNA profile found underneath his nails. His DNA profile was also not compared to the mixed DNA profile that was found on the handcuffs. There is a reasonable doubt in this particular case as it pertains to the evidence. There's no evidence here that the handcuffs in any way, shape, or form are connected to the crime. The evidence shows that Mr. Monroe suffered a single gunshot wound to his body. We've talked about the trajectory of the bullet as it passed through the entry and the exit wounds. When Dr. Fino was on the witness stand, she described her examination of Mr. Monroe's body. She indicated there were some older scratches, injuries. They weren't new injuries. The only recent trauma was the entry and exit wound of the bullet. But there was no other injuries to his body. There's no markings about his wrist that would tell us that the handcuffs might have been connected to the crime. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence whatsoever that the handcuffs in any way, shape, or form are connected to the murder of Mr. Monroe. That is a reasonable doubt as to that piece of evidence. So what do we know about these handcuffs that were found on the south side of Mr. Monroe's lawn, his front lawn? They're placed over by the Lincoln, the car that's parked to the south of his house. What do we know? We know that the handcuffs had a mixed DNA profile of at least 3 people. There could be more and are likely more. And how do we know that? Anna Wilson testified it's a mixed DNA profile of at least 3 people, and at least means there could be more. We know that it's a mixed DNA profile of men and women. There's X and Y chromosomes in the mixed DNA profile found on the handcuffs. We know that because of that, we know that there's at least 1 female donor. Ms. Wilson testified that Mr. Nichols is a potential contributor to this mixed DNA profile that contains at least 3 people. But a potential contributor does not mean that somebody is the contributor. Here's the distinction. With the spent .45 bullet casing, Ms. Wilson testified Paul Snyder is a match. Why can she say he's a match? Because she could identify a single profile. With a mixed DNA profile, you can't say there's a match because you can't extract out any single DNA profile. So if you can't extract out a single DNA profile, you can never say it's a match.